Hi, and welcome to the Red Bra Project. We are so excited to be back with you today. I'm Renee, and before I introduce our amazing guest to you today, I'm going to say hello to my brilliant co-host, Shauna. How's it going over
Oh,
there?
it's going well, and I haven't been referred to as brilliant in a while, so that felt good. Thank you.
Brilliant. It's going to be a brilliant day now, isn't it?
I hope so, right? The 13th. Well, whatever day it is, I don't know anymore.
Yeah, the calendar's overrated, I think.
Right. In 2020, no date matters. So,
That's right. We are here today with episode number 64, and our guest is actually a nomination from one of our previous Red Bra guests, Sajal Thacker, who has an incredible story herself. But today we get to introduce to you and highlight the amazing Margie Crowe, who has such a I want to say a wonderland of a background because there's just so many gems and just wisdom and all kinds of good stuff there. So Margie, welcome to the Red Bra Project. We're so excited to have you.
No, thank you so much. And I think that's very generous. I think I have like a circus of a background. So it's madness these days. But no, thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat and such a blessing.
You are so welcome. So I know the Red Bra community is going to be so excited to hear your story. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about where you're coming from today and just a little bit about your background, and then we'll dive into everything.
So in 30 seconds, right? So I'm currently a college professor as my main paying gig right now. Within that, I develop courses and professional development and try and make things inclusive, right? So I do a lot of advocacy work in the diversity and equity world. But before I came in this education piece, which is fairly new to me, I spent 20 years in the Air Force, retiring in 2014 when my daughter was diagnosed with severe autism. So I, said, well, I can't really do this military job anymore the way I could. And I became a special education teacher to kind of figure out what her world looked like, right? So this isn't like my other 5 children and, that kind of went through school, maybe had some challenges. This was going to be a very, very different world for me. But then getting into the special education piece, you kind of walk in and you see all the inequities, right? And so I know we have some shared experiences here with the autism community and with the special needs community, and just couldn't walk away from that. It just kind of snowballed into my doctoral work and some more advocacy work that kind of is more broad, for this entire population, but also a lot of the intersectionality between race and disability too. And so it's kind of what I'm doing every day. Very long days between work, advocacy, doctoral work. My daughter's here full time with a full-time team. So that was more than 30 seconds, but that's the nutshell of the last.
We don't limit you. You take as much time as you need. But what a beautiful, story and background, and so much that it's crazy how life gives us these things that we don't expect to have us pivot. And obviously, your daughter is one of those beautiful moments that gave you a pivot that you weren't expecting. Your work right now, though, that you're doing with diversity, equity, inclusion, have you seen with your classes a rise? I don't know if you're virtual or in person, but have you seen a rise in students wanting to be involved in that?
I teach virtually, but I'm one of the few professors because we have 4 campuses that gets to teach virtually. So most people are on campus, but I do interact with my students. We have a very diverse student population. And I think we're just finally getting to the place where they feel like they have permission to have these conversations. And some of that has come from rewriting some of the curriculum. I rewrote the history courses and the political science course to be more inclusive. And so they're starting to have some really difficult conversations. And I applaud the bravery, literally, of the instructors that are willing to have a discussion on reparations or to have a discussion on Native American history and the atrocities, and so now that door is being opened, the instructors are telling me that the students are talking about it and they have a higher participation rate. So we have students that are actually, where maybe everybody has participated that week versus, people are falling off because it's school, right? So most people don't like school even in college. So it's slow. I do notice more of my students kind of getting onto my LinkedIn. They don't send requests, and we certainly wouldn't accept them until they're not students. But it's interesting that they are starting to pay attention just by that kind of, LinkedIn view of like, hey, what is she doing? And I'm open about it in my introductions for every one of my courses. This is the work that I do. This is what my dissertation's on, resegregation trends in a school county. So I'm open about it. And I feel like that starts to give them some permission to start having these conversations that people don't know what to do with, right? They don't know if it's okay. They don't know if it's okay if you're a white person, right? So there's that piece of it that they're like, can I talk? Is it okay? I don't want to offend. Can I talk about it? And so we're just trying to give them kind of those safe spaces to have these conversations.
That's exactly what it sounds like too. They're realizing it's a safe space, and you're beginning to slowly see the comfort level,
Yes.
One, become established, and then hopefully increase from there.
Yeah, I hope so. And even with the instructors, right when COVID happened and everybody had to go home, I do some of the faculty development courses, and I said, we need to do a culturally responsive teaching, right? This is a whole new world, and we have to recognize who's in the classroom. We have to recognize now there's disparities, huge disparities because of COVID. And my colleagues and I just put out an article today on the effects of COVID and different racial and ethnic minority groups and kind of what that's done. So now we have these students that are already traditionally marginalized. Now they're at home. Now they're with their children. Now they maybe don't have the technology support that they needed because maybe they were on campus getting internet and computers, and now their children need it, and they're service workers, and they're working 2 jobs. They're the ones, thank God, for Walmart. People could say whatever they want about Walmart. I wouldn't have survived COVID with my daughter without the pickup line, right? And these are, a lot of my students work there. And so, having our instructors kind of understand, like, we need to be very open-minded and gentle right now with everything that they're dealing with. And then the students are getting COVID because they're in these service industries and they're around people all the time and they're taking great risks. And, as we talk about, we don't know what day it is. I think we just need to be done with 2020. I'm so over it and just want it to be over and help people get back to normal, whatever that's supposed to be. Or maybe we don't get back to normal because normal wasn't working so great either. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because as you were saying that, I was like, the way you're describing it, I mean, even with all the inequities that have now, the light that has been shown on them for students and others because of the times, I mean, the way you describe it, you can see this beauty and the growth, that the opportunity that's there for us to all finally learn from this, and take off really those blinders that we've had on, I worked in college and university settings for years, and those students that were first generation, and this was something that they need, that setting, they need these advisors. And so when you pull that from them, what that really looks like.
Right, and I've shifted some of the discussion boards, because we've kind of traditionally, I don't know, if you did discussion boards at any of your classes, K-12 college, they always ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up, basically, right? Or what are your aspirations? And I'm thinking, nobody wants to answer that anymore. We need to know, like, what are you facing? What are your challenges? What were your negative experiences this last week? We can shape how you write a good discussion board by you telling your story within this space. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to political science this week. We can shape that. But I think, asking in week 1 now, kind of, what are you facing? What didn't you solve this week? Because then now that they're at home, we can give them back to the advisors and say, hey, here's students that really, really need some support. Maybe, they're taking care of parents, or, there's just so many different things that they're facing that I think, what am I complaining about every day? My daughter, with all that, what she faces, still not the same as what some of my students are going through. And so, yeah, hopefully we're all taking a look at that and trying to do better, trying to make changes. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but we can start. We can start where we stand and start making small changes, or just be empathetic, for goodness sakes, So I think the empathy piece was really lacking prior to that. So,
and I think a big part of it too is, I mean, there, like you said, everyone's dealing with a lot more in their world right now. And so to think about what's your aspirations was a huge question to start with. But then you add on the year of 2020 and everything else, and it's just kind of like, you kind of want to just take a deep breath, and part of you just wants to like, not today, don't ask me that question today. I need to talk about how I've been able to get through the past week, like you said, or a couple months. What kind of support have you noticed that there's more support for students and for staff, and just during this year, just the last few months, let's just say over summer?
Now, I think at least my experience with the other faculty members is they go above and beyond. I mean, they're online 7 days a week, nighttime, weekends, answering text messages, trying to, work with the students. I don't know that we're doing the best job of supporting them, the faculty. I have a lot of K-12 teacher friends, and I asked them going back to school this fall, what kind of support have you been hearing from your leadership? What is your leadership doing to reach out to you, to support you? Because you also have your children at home, set up along the wall while you're trying to teach your live classes, and then you're trying to teach your own children, and maybe, spouses or partners have lost their jobs, and there's financial issues, and there's so much going on. So what's your leadership doing? Right? For the most part, zero. They're not even asking, are you okay? They're not even doing check-ins. So I'd say yes at, the lower levels, absolutely. Across systems with leadership, there's pockets, and there's a few good leaders, but I probably harp on that the most on social media is, we need to get leadership on board. And there's a school district that I may end up working with. And I said, before we even talk about this, if leadership is not on the table, I'm not helping you, right? So we have to be able to touch them. We have to be able to see what they're doing. We have to be able to ask their staff, because if they're failing them, they need to go. They need to go. We don't need to rehabilitate at this point. So we need to move them out of there and get people that are strong leaders in those positions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like now more than ever, we need, like you said, we need empathy. We need people to understand that it's not, as much as we want to return to normal, we're not there. And we have to look at what is in front of us, and everybody has these new challenges, and they may not be the same, but everybody has some.
And we're burning people out, we're absolutely burning people out, and I don't think we're giving people enough grace. So.
Yeah. Margie, you identify, it seems like throughout your career, and we've really touched on a few things, but it seems, obviously you are very passionate about what you do and why you do it. And I love that, because I feel like there's a lot of people that you work because you have to work. You work because you have to pay the bills and support your family. But it sounds like you've been able to kind of pivot with your different phases in life, and then also feed your passion along with being a mother, and a friend and a wife and everything. So with all of that said, have you always been like this? Like just say out of high school, you knew that you had to do something that you were passionate about, or is that something you discovered along the way?
No, I think, and I wish my mom was on here, and I'll send this to her. And I think, she was always, I came out saying, you're not my boss, right? So, and I don't know where that came from, but as a little kid, I was like, you're not my boss about anything. So I had that little sassy attitude, very driven. But we are the makeup of our background. So I think the poverty thing drove me. There was a lot of dysfunctional background, a lot of abuse in my childhood. And I think all of those things either bury you or they drive you. And it always drove me to just keep pushing on. Going in the military was a very unexpected thing that I did. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't really know people in the military. And it wasn't a really well thought out decision at the time. I was like, well, I need to get out of here. So let me go see a recruiter. And I left 6 weeks later. That could have been disastrous, like absolutely disastrous. And I enlisted. I didn't know anything about officers at the time. And then I got into basic training, and the same thing, sassy pants. I struggled. I barely got out of there. The only day we could get off base, I lost my pass and I had to pull 24-hour duty because I put makeup on that day. Because I was like, I am so sick of looking like this. And I got my makeup on and put it on and went to formation. And of course I didn't do well. And so it's by the grace of God that these training instructors did not toss me out. I was so naughty. Like I was so naughty during that stuff. But I always knew that, this was a really good place for me, but I needed to be in a leadership role. So I only spent about 2.5 years enlisted before I went through an officer training program. And so I think whatever I've been in, I think it's just an internal drive to just do more and to help and to be a servant leader. I think that's such a big deal to me. Is I'm going to introduce you to Shereen Daniels, who's absolutely fabulous over in the UK. And one of our early discussions was on kind of like this piece, like what's driving you. And I said, if you can walk by the inequities and the injustices in this world, and if you could walk by people suffering, you have some soul searching to do. Like innately, if that doesn't move you to action, I don't know what will. Right? I don't know what will. So I think it's hard for me to turn away. It's probably not the healthiest. I probably don't have the best boundaries. I work too much. I'm probably in my kids' faces too much. I have adult children who probably have had just fun enough with their mother. And now I have a grandson to ruin too. So now I can go and boss him around now too. So, and my poor boys, like my son will pop into some of these life things and run right back out. Because he's like, oh no, I'm going to be in the middle of that conversation now about my responsibilities as a white male growing up. And he's like out the door. So.
Did you say you have 5 children?
So I have 6, 4 that are biological, 2 that I raised that were my stepchildren that are adults now. 3 of them are active duty military. And then luckily one's close by that's stationed down in Norfolk with my 3-year-old grandson who is, okay. So I became one of those grandparents where, you know, maybe you're kind of strict on your kids, but I'm like, he's so cute. You can destroy my house, spread yogurt, I don't care. Too cute.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, that's our purpose in life, is to spoil later, be strict with our own. So I'm curious, so when you pivoted to special education, what did that look like for you? Were you actually teaching, being a service provider, or were you focused more on like the IEP and the side of services and getting that for children?
So yes, all the above. So
all of it.
As a collaborative teacher, I taught in the gen ed classroom with students. So there would be, you know, half the class would be typically developing, the other half had some sort of IEP 504 or something like that. And so I had several classes I taught like that in the high school, but then you also have your caseload. And they tended to give me every student that they considered troubled, right? So this was this narrative that was going on early on where I'm like, why are my classrooms not really having the students that should be in here, right? So they were predominantly Black and brown students. They were predominantly ESL. And I kept saying, this doesn't make them learning disabled. This doesn't mean they should be on an IEP because they've had massive gaps in their education. Why are you dumping all of these kids in here as if this is where they belong, instead of figuring out where they should be and what supports we need to give them? I had a lot of students that were in and out of juvie, and I'm like, behavioral issues doesn't make them qualified for an IEP. Stop it, you know? And so yes, there was conflict, obviously, with me and the administration. Luckily, some of them are gone because it's still my school district here and my children homeschool, so that should tell you something. And fabulous teachers there, but on my way out and working on my doctorate, I uploaded like 14 pages of case law for my final portfolio that said, here's all the ways that we are violating compliance laws with these students. This is not okay, right? It's not okay. It's not okay. So I kind of burned some bridges, clearly, and so I'm doing my dissertation work in a completely different school district in another state. Not really welcome, but there's a new superintendent here who is very open-minded now, and we're starting to have some really good conversations about how can I help? It's still my community, right? It's still my community, and you know, I want to help you. I'm not here to cause trouble, but this is not okay. This is not okay what we're doing with these students. And so I know, you know, you have experience with IEPs and special ed, and there's so many great teachers in that space, but there's also ones that only come in long enough to get out of it, right? To get in the school district. And so they're not, the longevity is what, 3 years? I think the average special education teacher spends 3 years. And so we take the least experienced teachers and put them with the most profoundly, you know, disabled or needy children, right? That really need experts in that area. So we could do like hours and hours on special education. Right, and then I see.
Good for you for speaking up, though. I mean, even if it kind of made you have to take a slower path to your dissertation? I mean, it has to feel good that you weren't quiet about it.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't, I don't seriously. And I am learning to probably shape my behavior a little bit. So it's not direct, seems to really upset people. But I'm learning the older I get, like they're okay. Their feelings are hurt, but they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. They need to take care of this. So.
Yeah, Margie, I mean, thank you for speaking up and not feeling or not choosing not to. A lot of people couldn't choose not to because of fear of not moving forward or fear of losing their job. And you know, the old sayings, you know, the squeaky wheel must go or whatever. But I mean, oftentimes those issues and those things that come up really have to be discussed. And it sounds like you found a better fit anyhow.
It is, and so with that said, I am very cautious though. Even today, like I need to keep my job, right? We all need to keep our job. So I'm not looking
Sure.
to, so no, I think there's a fear. And one of my colleagues, Jacqueline Anderson, she and I published an article last month on kind of women in higher education and kind of tiptoeing through that, because with COVID and all this, we're always kind of fearful, whether it's real or perceived, right? There is a perception like we have to be so careful as women, no matter what industry we're in. But getting fired, and it happens, right, for our children, for whatever.
Yeah, and
so,
any job right now is worth hanging on to very
right,
tightly. It's very, very tough out there.
Right. But I think there's a bigger fear for women, like collectively. There was a panel I sat on last year at the War College, and I think what was most profound to me is that we have all these really amazing women, right? They've done amazing things, and they've all had to take time off for their children. Not by choice, but mandated because they were now a liability, or they needed some extra time because they now needed to not be in at 6, they needed to be in at 8. And I'm thinking, we're losing all this valuable human capital, literally, because we can't be flexible and let somebody telecommute for a year while they're taking care of their new baby or taking care of a parent. And so this higher ed article that Jacqueline and I wrote speaks back to women that are deans and higher administration in these universities that have to leave because they have caretaker, responsibilities. And now with COVID, there should be no excuse for that. We all clearly know we can all telecommute, right? So unless you're in a SCIF and you're a top secret, area in the Pentagon, we can do this from home, right? We can do this from home. So there should be no more of that, but it's going to take a while to kind of change that paradigm and then thinking, because we have to get male allies on board with us to support that and to say, no, it's okay to have that flexibility, right? It's okay if she's home because she probably is going to do more work than here because she's not worried about her kids, her mother that she's taking care of, or whatever is happening.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think it is, especially for women. I know for me, my kids, when they were home, I felt like I had to show even more what I was doing. So people didn't think I was just helping them or doing their schoolwork, even though I needed to be doing that too. And then have a special needs son who does not thrive with remote learning. Well, neither of my children really do. But I mean, on top of not getting services and things. So yeah, I think as women, there's that constant fear that we have to show we're still doing it.
Always. But I think it's been inbreeding. I think the first time my oldest son, who's almost 27 now, got sick, and I was young enlisted, and I was in combat camera, so I just opened to women. So it was one of the first combat career fields open to women back then, back in the early 90s. And so I had all these men, and they've been there for 20 years, and here comes a girl. They don't want me anyways. And then they definitely don't want a pregnant one because good Lord have mercy on that, right? And so then I had this baby that, is fine now as an adult, but he was a sick baby. He had asthma. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm sure half of it was my fault, right? Because I was probably feeding him stuff too early. Shouldn't be eating. We know better now. And the first time I had to call in for work, I got in trouble. I got written up. And then my supervisor went as far as calling the local hospitals to find out that there was daycares that I could then the next time take him to and pay a daycare in the hospital for sick kids. And I thought, this is insane, because, and then my mantra kind of became over the years in the military, like, I don't have a wife, okay? So I don't have a wife to stay home in these very traditional roles to take care of all these children. And I did catch that level of crap, excuse my French, even when I worked at the Pentagon from the men I worked with of, why aren't you here on time? Or why are you leaving at 5 o'clock? And I'm like, well, first of all, I came in at 6 while you showed up at 9 after the gym, and I work at night, and I don't have a wife at home to do this for me. Okay, sorry, I don't have a wife. And it's not to demean the wives, but it was that expectation, because they did have somebody there for the most part, supporting all of that. And I'm like, I'm doing it all, right? So get off my back. And then eventually I had a fabulous boss at the very end of my career that ended up marrying a young woman, and they had a big age gap, and she was definitely more progressive, and they had 2 kids right away, and she just read him the riot act every day. So he became very flexible, because he was always getting called home to have to take care of these babies. And it was great because he let me start telecommuting. This was probably 12, 13 years ago, right towards the end of my career. And that was great because I could take my kids to school. I could come in for 5 or 6 hours, and then I'd work after I picked them up at 11 o'clock at night, and I got my work done. But it shouldn't have taken 20 years for that kind of behavior. And we're still seeing it. And COVID, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but COVID has shown us this in all of our industries, right? We're teachers, a lot of teachers and other women are having to choose job or children that are at home. And I know there's men, because my son is a single father and he does it all himself, but for the most part, it's still us, right?
So I was curious, one of the great things I've noticed about you just in our early conversations, and even today you've been sharing other women, how do you find people to lift you up? How do you find that group of people that do support you with all of these many hats that you're wearing?
A lot of it's hired, right? So I do have a full, there's a full ABA team here, and I'm sure you know what that is. They're here like 35, 40 hours a week. I have a caregiver, that's here like 60 hours a week, and I'm trying to hire another one. So I really rely heavily on that because I don't have family around, but I need to work just for my own self, but also, for my children. But I think COVID actually has been this blessing to me because I get to meet women like you. And so I finally feel like, we've traveled this diversity and equity road for so long. I did this for 13 of my 20 years in the military. So that was like literally more than half my career was working in diversity and equity for the officers. You just kind of roll it. You're so alone for so long, and COVID hit and people had to start connecting in ways we didn't connect before. And I feel like I have this amazing tribe now, this amazing tribe of people that now at almost 50, I finally feel like I have people that are there to uplift me and to help. And some of them are men. So I think the male allyship that's coming out of this is such a blessing. And I make sure to be like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't think for 1 second that I do not appreciate this, or what you're doing for your daughters, or what you're doing for your wives, your sisters. And one of my biggest champions of this is my son that's about to be 23. I get messages every day from him from Japan. He's stationed over there with the, I'm proud of you, mama, go get it, mama, kinds. And he shares my stuff out with other women. And so it's taken a long time. And I'm sure you guys know, as business women, we don't get a lot of love and support, right? Traditionally. And sometimes it's worse from some women, right? So there's that piece. I don't know about your experience. I definitely get a lot of trolls, and they tend to be females. And I'm like, isn't this hard enough? Could we just not do this to each other? Let's help.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very true. And I mean, I think I love how you're our second guest actually this month that has shared they have finally kind of found their tribe in their 50s or close to 50. And that in itself is reassuring to many, many people out there. And especially, like you said, women in business or doing certain things, it can feel very alone sometimes. And you're raising your family and you have your kids and you have your professional life. And then, friendships, what is that sometimes? Right. But I mean, that is just so reassuring to hear you say that, because I mean, there are women out there to connect with and who are going to support you and not judge and just absolutely uplift you for who you are. And I think one of the cool things that you do, Margie, and I can't wait to hear more about this and share with our viewers and listeners, but you talk about handing the ladder down. So can you share a little bit more about that personal philosophy of yours and how that came about?
Right. I think that handing the ladder down piece is something that just hasn't happened enough. I think, especially within women, and I'm not trying to bash women, and some of the women I'm going to introduce you to that you're going to love, Nicole and Shireen, we had a live discussion on feminism, right? And so why we are not feminists. And I know that sounds really odd, but it's because it wasn't for everybody, right? So this feminism movement wasn't for women of color. And so, you know, we have Nicole that's in Canada and she's biracial, and Shireen that's in the UK and she's Black, and Abby in the UK is Black. And they said they've never considered themselves feminists because it never included them, right? So there was never women handing that ladder down. There was never women within this movement bringing them into it. If anything, was putting up barriers. And so to have that discussion, I said, I had a very profound moment back in 1995, and I'm not going to call out the woman, but there was something that she did publicly that I thought, you just turned your back on all of us with that behavior right there. You did not hand the ladder down. You actually made this other female look horrendous to the public. And if that's what a feminist is, then I'm tag out, right? Because I want to help other women, and we have to create opportunities. It can't just be about us and like, ooh, I finally made it through this wave of men, right? Think about it in the military. You know, I retired as lieutenant colonel, not an easy thing to do. And it can't be about like, well, I made it, you know, like elbowed my way through. You have to hand the ladder back down. We have to create these opportunities. We can't be selfish about it. And so now I'm finding this amazing group of women that feel the same way. And so we actively try to create other opportunities for women. I mean, even in my home. So my daughter's caregiver, I absolutely adore her. And she kind of grew up like I did, where there wasn't a lot of opportunities. And so she's going to be shifting out of some of caregiver duties into helping me with some of this work, right? And then we will move on from there because we need to create these opportunities. It's not her fault that she didn't have them there. It wasn't my fault that I grew up in poverty, but I didn't have women to help me through that. So I think we have a huge responsibility. My children have a huge responsibility. My boys, you know, messy rooms, long hair, tattoos, I don't care. But these are the things I want you to listen to, right? I need you to create these opportunities for your wives, for your sisters, for your, you know, your sister, right? Who can't defend herself in any way, shape, or form, for your daughters. You need to be vocal. So it can't just be you and I. It's got to be the men. And there's some amazing men out there that are truly doing that. And if you get on my LinkedIn, you'll see some of them will promote my stuff just to promote our voices. LaRon Barton is one of them. If you look at he's got 2 more TED Talks coming out, and he will go out of his way to lift up our voices. And that's so, so important. So he's handing the ladder, you know, down to us, and there's nothing for him in that. Like, he gets nothing from that. And so those people are so incredibly important.
I love it. I mean, by every single person that you touch and you show and teach that to, it is creating this positive ripple effect, which is so powerful.
I feel like that is so much of why Renee and I are doing the Red Bra Project, for stories like yours. And, you know, we want to celebrate what women are doing and not have it feel competitive or that we need to have jealousy because you were successful, Margie, and, you know, that path didn't work for us, but instead being happy for your success. And I think that I love that passing the ladder down. And I think, you know, that may be a phrase that we adopt and use as a catchphrase.
No, and I'm grateful. You know, I said before we even started, you know, anybody who wants to listen to me, I'm like, that's fabulous. I'm happy to talk. I don't know why you want to hear it, but it's great. But I love the work that you're doing. And so when I wrote to Shireen and Nicole this morning, I'm like, see what they're doing, right? It's really, really important because generationally growing up, we just didn't do that with women. We weren't there for each other. You know, I think that's why high school reunions are still so traumatic. I haven't been to one over 30 years. I have no interest in stepping back into that. And it's not the guys. It was the whole Mean Girl, you know, the Mean Girl movie. And we just can't do that anymore. It's just so destructive. And so I love what you're doing, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for your kind words. And I mean, if anything, you know, like you said, it was generations ago, but you're still feeling it now. But we're also kind of leading the way and showing and leading by example that, you know, it doesn't have to be, you know, it doesn't have to be so catty, you know, that you can support and raise each other up, and you can do your own thing, and there's enough for your best friend and her best friend and everybody else too, you know. which actually is a great segue into one of our favorite questions, just because there's so many different perspectives about it. But how do you push through fear? I know that it sounds like you've really relied on yourself kind of once you stepped out of high school into the military and then onward and upward in college and everything. So how do you continue to push through fear?
Goodness, fake it. So I think that's the thing too, is just to be really honest. I don't know if it's my age. I don't know. It's, what it is that I'm not afraid to be very truthful about these kinds of things. I think I'm afraid every single day. I think I have fears every single day. And some days I literally just fake it to get through it because it's just too much. Other days I rely very, very heavily on my faith and prayer and other people. So, I brought up my daughter's caregiver. She's very young and she will be the one. There's days that I'm like, oh, and I'm not going to make it. It's too much. And she's like, yes, you are. Yes, you are going to do it. So stop it. And so I do have those women in my life that say, knock it off. Like, knock it off with this irrational thinking. Knock it off with, thinking that things aren't going to work for you. But no, I think it's okay to say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. There's a lot of days I'm really afraid. I'm afraid for my daughter. I just try not to give power to that, right? So I just try to do a lot of self-talk, and I try to encourage my students the same thing. They have the same fears. And I say, look, I'm afraid, but we need to tell ourselves it's going to be okay. We can't dwell in that. We can't live in that. We're supposed to pray, hope, don't worry, right? So pray, hope, don't worry, move forward. But reach out, when you're feeling that way, and I think when we can share our stories and share our vulnerabilities, there's people that always step up and come in and say, I feel that too. And maybe it's just the two of you being afraid together, but it helps in that moment, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I love just being honest about it too, because the reality is that a lot of us are still afraid.
Yeah. And I think that for some people who may not feel like they have anybody to reach out to, when you do feel alone, there are these platforms like this, like the Red Bra Project and Core Woman and other platforms where we have been able to highlight and share other women's stories. And that is a sense of hope and inspiration. And, if you don't feel like you have somebody you can pick up the phone or text or anything, go and find one of these platforms and hit play. We've got a whole bunch in our arsenal, but, find one that fits and works for you. And I think that's so important because, like you have talked about, you felt like you found your tribe later on in life. And, you can go through different phases in life too, where you feel like you have a solid support system, and other times you're like, where did everybody go? So.
Well, I think in the autism world, Shauna probably knows, some days are really isolated. But, I'm such a believer in faith. I have a newer LinkedIn connection colleague that I happen to finally connect with on Instagram, and he posted the most beautiful video of himself and his son. And his son has severe autism. And I was like, it's like the angels and the bells and the whistles go off, because I'm like, the more people share in that moment, I didn't feel so alone in the fact that I had painters here patching holes because Lily will get so upset and put a hole in the wall. And just most people are not going to understand that, but just to see somebody's really quick Instagram clip story, I went, oh, not alone at 11 o'clock at night, stressing about the fact that I got another hole to fix, right? And I think the more we can just share our stories with people, because there's so many preconceived notions, right? They take a look, they prejudge, they assume too much. And if we can say, hey, look, this is where I came from. This is what I did. Maybe I'm not proud of this. Maybe I'm proud of this, piece of it. In Summer, I know you interviewed Summer, and she and I I don't even know what that podcast was supposed to be about or what we originally thought, but it turned into like this really open confessional that I was like, my mother hasn't even heard half of this, so I hope she's not going to listen. I don't think she knew I was engaged at 16 years old, and she probably wouldn't appreciate that secret being out now. But I think it's important to show people like, hey, we all do things and change, and don't have to be ashamed of it, but maybe sharing it will connect with somebody and make them feel less lonely in that moment, or less of an imposter, right? There's so much imposter syndrome that's happening with all of this that, just to be honest and to put it out there. judge if you will. I don't know. I'm too tired. I don't have time to worry about
No, I think what you said is so right. I mean, I think there's something in everybody's story too, and I'm sure Renee feels this way too. Every guest that we meet, I'm pulling things from. One of our guests went through a divorce. I'm like, okay, I relate to her in that, and I love what she said about it. And then you writing and me learning that you're a special needs mom, I pull from that, And so I think we all have this overlap that we don't realize, and it just humanizes us so much when we do share for others to not feel alone, even if they physically are alone.
Right. Absolutely.
So good. I love this. I love it because you can listen to 5 different stories. And the funny thing is Shauna's going to get something different. Margie's going to get something different. Our listeners are going to get something different, but that's the cool thing about the power of a story. So.
No, absolutely. So, and I've started to go through a lot of your different podcasts, and I do same thing. I'm picking things out, and I'm like, oh, it's not the only. I think that's the big piece is that a lot of times we think it's only us, right? I'm the only one that feels like a failure. I'm the only one that's fearful. Whatever it is that we all have our own insecurities and issues, and just not being alone, especially right now in this COVID pandemic where we don't know what is going on with anything or when it's going to end. Those connections are so much more important.
100%. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Shauna.
Oh, I was just going to ask the big question. So if you have something, I'll let you go.
I was agreeing. I'm like, but I see you. I see you moving.
Well, Margie, we ask all of our guests, and if you're not familiar, I know you've been listening to some episodes, so you probably are, but the red bra really is a significant piece of your confidence, whether you can see it inside or outside of your clothes. It's there. It's giving you that moment of strength, and sometimes you throw on that red bra in those moments when you need extra courage or be brave. And so we are curious if you would share, big or small, a red bra moment of yours with us.
Goodness. And I've tried to think about that. Like, I don't think, do I have anything that's even, well, I don't know. I don't know that I dwell on that a lot, but I think there's a lot of mini moments I was trying to figure out. Like, some days it's like, it's a miracle if I get my hair washed, right? So that might be my red bra moment because it's such a disaster. But I think the one thing that right now, like in this moment, that it would be my red bra moment is the fact that there's been so much ageism over the years with women and what we shouldn't be doing at this age. And about to get my doctorate. And yes, it took me until I'm 50 years old, but I think people should hear that, right? So they should say, like, I have so many students that say, well, I'm just returning to school, I'm 26. I was like, oh, I wish I was 26, right? And so, sharing that, hey, I'm 50. I shouldn't hide that it took me until 50. I had a bazillion things that happened between 0 and 50. And so, yeah, to just be able to kind of hit that milestone and then maybe share that to inspire somebody else to keep going. Like, I get it. You may have been home raising kids all this time. Start. There isn't a date or an age by which we have to do that. So I am wicked excited to finally, turn into Dr. Crowe at some point this year, God willing, if my committee lets me through. So that's my current red bra moment.
Well, I think that's an excellent one. And I think that Renee and I just from this interview could have named others for you. So I think you're very humble in saying you don't know if you have any.
100%. But I love how, you even admit, I mean, we all do. Some days washing your hair is a bra moment. And I'm not going to outwardly admit how many days, or maybe I will since last time I got done. So, yeah. So, I mean, that's huge. And that's the great thing about red bra moments is, like Shauna said, they're all different sizes, and sometimes we reflect on the big ones, and sometimes the little ones actually are the real big ones. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and joining. I know that your story is going to inspire and touch others. There's so many parts of it, and for all of our listeners, make sure that you follow Margie. She's on LinkedIn, and she gives out incredible articles, posts, resources, everything. So I know that's your primary source, but where else can people reach out to you or kind of connect with you?
That's really kind of my main area. I don't do a ton of social media. I am on Instagram, but it was just to stalk my 13-year-old when he wanted his account. On there, so I will share yours out there, and it's Margie, Margiemk, and you're probably gonna, don't judge. It's, it's us skiing. There's the whiskey I carried back from Michigan, like carefully, you know, guarding my Traverse City whiskey. So
Absolutely. You got to protect
you
that.
know, I am what I am. So, you know, if you can find me on there, great. I'll be happy to connect with you, but absolutely you can send me through LinkedIn. I accept all connections as long as it's not somebody being weird. And my email's on there, and I'm always willing to listen, talk, and to share resources or connect people with somebody that may be able to help them. So I don't want anybody to feel like they can't do that. I'm very open to that.
Awesome.
Okay, well,
Okay.
thank you so much for taking
Yeah.
the time and listening and letting me laugh in the middle of the day. So this was fabulous.
Well, it was our pleasure. And we end every episode with a quote. And the one that we chose for you, Margie, is sometimes we are tested not to show our weaknesses, but to discover our strengths. And I think Renee and I both agree that is definitely you. And you have persevered through all of the challenges that have been put in front of you.
No, I appreciate that. And it's, I think faith-wise, it's very fitting because, you know, within my faith community, there's a lot of people that want you to be very gentle, right? Mother Teresa. And I'm like, I didn't get that spirit. I got the Thomas Becket spirit. So I will keep praying, but I might pull my sword at the same time. So, yeah.
Oh, we love it. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our viewers that have tuned in. Please share this story with somebody who may need it in their life. And make sure to follow us over at Instagram at The Red Bra Project. You can find all of our stories under our YouTube page, the Red Bra Project channel, or at theredbraproject.com. We also have the blog version. So for some of you who would prefer to read through everything, that's up there too. So thanks everybody and have a great evening. Thank you, ladies.
Bye.
Bye, thanks.